What strikes me about some of the renderings I've seen of Jumeirah and other projects that you're working on is that architects who are only designing a mid or high rise building are at like V8, tachometer all the way to the right to get that project done. Can you walk me through then the model? Is it master planned and Dubai is selling the parcels off with like some kind of a design code? Or are you guys designing 67 buildings? Walk me through that model.
Doing planning for that particular project, what we're really providing is the development framework for the plan.
Sure.
In other words, we're defining the uses that are on site, the adjacencies that we want those uses to leverage or to
Right.
optimize, the connections from site to site, and then a street system, the public realm design, and basically what we wind up doing is giving architects a brief for, say, an office parcel.
Okay.
That this particular office building, to achieve the total FAR for that plot, maybe 20 stories.
Right.
And we think that the lobby should be configured to this corner, for instance.
Right.
But we want a through connection to the adjacent block.
I see.
And so we define essentially what they should consider when they're designing those buildings. Now, the idea is that these notions are a way to measure their work. How well does it connect? How well does it contribute to the rest of the master plan?
Right.
And then what we're trying to do as well is we're trying to do things like leverage synergies of adjacent parking. For instance, if it's an office tower and it's next to a shopping center, those two uses have complementary
Right.
cycles for
Daytime,
parking.
nighttime. Yep.
Well, and also weekends,
Sure.
when the shopping center needs the most parking, the office, there's nobody parking there.
Right.
So by positioning this infrastructure near each other, then we can actually optimize that infrastructure. There's less parking that has to be built. There is it's used more, and then we look at this as a way to actually get more walkability within the scheme, because we want people actually not necessarily parking directly underneath their building and going to their office.
Right.
If they park next door, they walk on the street, they pass a shop,
Right.
they animate the street. All of those things actually enhance walkability and make the overall planning better. So these are the types of kind of guidelines that we give the urban development.
Right.
Now, all of these projects are, while they may be private developers or our clients, they're always a part of a bigger public plan, because these projects are generally open to the public, and the projects are big enough that they have a great impact to the blocks and maybe even the region surrounding the
So
project.
even a private master plan is going to be integrated into the city's municipal plan and regional plan.
Right, exactly.
I had Andres Twani of New Urbanism fame, like episode 3, and one of the questions I asked him, and it's the question I've asked other people, is does one go about doing a large scale development without having the constituent buildings seem frozen in time, all the same materials, all the same aesthetic? And so it's interesting that you're saying you kind of give a massing level commentary. Do you include things like material suggestions and or mood boards, visual preferences? How narrow does this thin commentary stay?
We try not to prescribe aesthetic systems so much. From a materiality point of view, we encourage the architects to try to understand the local context. And in particular, a place like Dubai, there's very severe weather, so there's a limit to how much vision glass you can have in a building by energy code. We encourage some kind of cultural sensitivity. However, this is a master plan that's a 20-year endeavor, and aesthetic systems that we have now that might be popular are going to be very different, 10 years
Right.
from now. So our goal is not necessarily to say, oh, we want you to use this particular detail or this color scheme. What we think that's more important is the performance of the building and how it integrates with the other buildings and the other activities within the master plan.
Could you walk me through the hierarchy of priorities that you have in tackling a new development like this?
Well, first, of course, we do an analysis of the site. We
Mhm.
try to understand, in particular, accessibility is quite key, particularly if it's a large project,
Mhm.
how people are coming and getting on and off the site. And then we're looking at, as well, adjacent uses and how they may be leveraged to help whatever we're doing, on that particular project. Then we try to understand, what are the goals that our client has in terms of what are their ambitions. Is their ambition merely to, develop to the full extent of their entitled property? In other words, do they want to max out their FAR?
Right.
Is their goal to create something unique that's never been done before? Is their goal to increase tourism? Is
Uh-huh.
it to increase more opportunities for, say, young creatives to live and work in this project? I mean, there's a lot of different underlying goals that may be a part of the planning. And in that analysis, we can shape the design and create a vision that helps to bring a physical manifestation of these ideas to the forefront. So I think a lot of it is reacting to the context and then also understanding the vision and then combining common things in uncommon ways so that you get something that's truly unique or truly value added at the end of the day.
You're not designing these things in a vacuum, obviously. Can you talk about places and spaces that often are in the back of your mind as you're designing these streetscapes and as you're designing these massing commentaries, the urban environments that you've encountered in your life, which you're trying to draw on?
Well, we globally, of course. So there are many places throughout the world that we consider great inspiration. I mean, I would think, say Barcelona has this amazing scale, and we often refer to the Ramblas as one of the great civic spaces,
Right.
in the
I
world.
was there a few months ago.
Um, because it's a linear space. In general, a lot of the planning in Barcelona is very interesting with the diagonal and the
Mhm.
way the blocks are chamfered. You get all of this interesting scale. However, there's lots of American cities that we refer to as well. For instance, the block scale of Portland
Uh-huh.
Portland is considered the world's most walkable city, and it has to do with the scale of the blocks themselves,
Just like
the
250 by
permeability.
250 or something, if I remember reading about it.
About
It's really
200 by
tight, yeah.
200. So it's a very tight grid. And while that's not practical all the time because the ratio of, say, streets to developable parcels is greater, so it's not
Right.
as efficient, there are other ways to create overlays that allow the permeability and the accessibility without using streets every time, like for instance through using mid-block arcades, which again are kind of a European idea developed in the late 18th century, and they create a kind of connection from one plaza or one street to another. So these ideas are a big part of our planning. But there's also a lot of other work in Asia that we find compelling too. One of my favorite projects in Shanghai is Shinton-D, which was replanned by Ben Wood, who's a great urban planner, where he
Uh-huh.
was able to convince the developer to save a lot of these historic buildings in the French Concession. This is the first project in China that the developer actually saved existing historic buildings, and it's changed the face
A
of
developer
development in
saving
China.
something. It was
It's pretty amazing, and it's a great urban space, one of the best. So there's a lot to learn from a lot of architects, and we're constantly trying to be inspired by a lot of these different ideas.
as I was looking at the master plan for Jumeirah Central, I was looking at, where you had your plazas. So I know you have a huge amount of retail in the center, and so in some senses, I'm sure there's semi-public, although they're retail spaces. I'm sure there's semi-public plaza kind of things there. But I was surprised that there wasn't some gigantic Platz, mock Platz, kind of thing in the center. I did see some on the periphery. Could you talk a little bit about plaza design, plaza programming, what you tell clients about it, and what goes into your designs? Because that's kind of one of the secret sauce pieces. It seems like even as I look at your renderings, you're showing these public spaces, and wouldn't it be great to hang out there?
Okay, well, I think Public space planning really has a lot to do with finding the right scale and understanding what the activities that you're trying to promote in those spaces. We have one large park that's part of the Jumeirah Central
Right.
Master Plan. That park is about the same size as Bryant Park in New York.
Right.
Bryant Park is a sort of an ideal right-sized park, and it has a lot of features that make it one of the most successful city parks in the world. A lot of it has to do with the perimeter shade that the sycamore trees create, so that you have activity like where the people play chess, or they have small retail, or
Sure.
children's play structures. They're all underneath this canopy, and there's all this kind of great human scale. However, they also have this very big open lawn. So if they want to have a big event like the fashion show or ice skating in the winter, they have screen on the green, the movie theater, the movies that they show in the summertime. They have enough gathering space for that. So that we look at that particular park as one of the great parks in the world from the standpoint of a civic, a kind of an urban park. There are lots of other smaller parks that we've modeled as well, and mainly the goal is to find a way to find a dialogue between the buildings that surround the park and then the activities within the park. And so, the parks in Jumeirah Central are always activated with, children's play structures, with some urban farming, with an area for some community display and kind of cultural expression, as well as just a sort of open space for kid to kick a soccer ball or whatever. So you want to have some flexibility in these parks and make them right-sized, and variety is more important than anything.
Were people in your line of work doing projects of the scale that we're seeing right now 30 years ago? Or is this a new phenomenon? I mean, your St. Petersburg thing said 5,600 units. Is this like a modern phenomenon? And do you think that it has a lot of legs, a lot of runway left because of growth in the Middle East and Asia? Maybe talk about this, what you're doing in historical context.
Well, actually, large-scale urban planning's been around for a long time. You can go back to the Romans, basically.
Sure. But I mean, at a
And,
private level, like where private.
well, even like Ebenezer Howard, who did the sort of the Garden City
Yep.
master plans in Europe. I mean, there's been a lot of great urban planning that has been done over the years. Great examples in the U.S. that are probably 50, 60 years old are a lot of the planning that was done on the Irvine Ranch in
Yep.
Southern California. And these are suburban models. They're not as dense as the kinds of projects that we're doing.
Same principle.
But, Frank Lloyd Wright, came up with Broadacre City, which is basically a visionary rural plan. So, I mean, and we look at a lot of this stuff, of course, to try to understand, well, what are its implications today? Probably the difference between planning at that scale, say 50 years ago, and where we are today is, with computers and 3D visualization, the speed is so much faster, and we can make photorealistic representations
Sure.
of vast pieces of property just because of the technology. So it looks like there's a lot more idea there than probably maybe that you could have seen, say, 50 years ago. In
I
other words,
see.
things look so much more worked out. Also, when you work globally, and particularly in emerging markets, the projects have a tendency to just be really large because they're in a hurry. They're trying to develop major parts of cities, particularly in Asia, where the cities are growing like crazy. I mean, there's over 100 cities in China that are over 10 million people. So, I mean, it's really amazing the density and the scale in other parts of the world that we're not really familiar with as much here in the United States.
100 cities with over 10 million people, and each of those cities, I'm sure, could handle a big project.
Oh
of the
yeah,
kind that you
all
guys
of these
do.
cities have very ambitious planning that's going on, and I think there's a lot to do. Put it that way.